Hi everyone and welcome back to the Beginner's FreeCAD series for version 1. The subject we are going to model in this FreeCAD tutorial is a laser module housing. It consists of multiple parts and can be physically disassembled, making it an assembly where each part can be modelled individually in FreeCAD. We'll be utilising the skills that we've already learned in this FreeCAD course on multi-body modelling. We'll also apply later knowledge regarding part design multi-transforms, further cementing your FreeCAD expertise. Before starting in FreeCAD, let's examine each part individually, starting from the middle. Our first step is simplification, removing the finishing features such as chamfers and patterns to reveal the base form. Internally, there is a step at each end, again removing them to reveal the base shape, which is a simple hollow box. This is where choosing the right plane to start the sketch upon becomes important. If we decide to approach this from the side, we need to sketch the rectangle form, pad it, and then hollow it with a specific thickness, which requires two operations, the pad and the thickness. However, if we approach this from the top or bottom, we can reduce the process to a single operation by sketching both the outer and inner rectangles, then using a single pad to create the extrusion. We can even handle the chamfers directly in the sketch. By drawing chamfer corners, we save an additional operation and also identify additional needs to manage the chamfer's impact on the model. In this case, if we apply a chamfer to the hollow rectangle, we must chamfer both the outer and inner edges. Otherwise, the outer chamfer may encroach on the inner edge, which, if pushed further, will cause an error due to zero thickness. By sketching the chamfer, we can identify this design flaw early and apply the necessary internal chamfer as needed. For this build, we'll add the chamfers later to address other potential issues and demonstrate how to handle them. Also, we'll be using symmetry to our advantage by centering the rectangles around the sketch origin. This means our axis will be through the center, allowing us to pattern operations without needing a datum object. For example, this datum object would be required if the rectangles were sketched with one of their corners positioned near the origin. Remember, the more additional helpers and operations we add, the more complex our model becomes, raising the risk of instability and increasing the CPU computation time. So let's start modeling this in FreeCAD. If you like what you see and you want to donate to the channel, then you can do so via Ko-Fi or Ko-fi at ko-fi.com/MANG0 or via PayPal at paypal.com/paypalme/DarrenBEstone. I also run a Patreon where you can get early access and additional content, and that's at patreon.com/MangoJelly Solutions. Links can be found in the channel header, on the About page, or in the descriptions of these videos. So we're already in FreeCAD. I've created a new document and I'm in the part design workbench. Let's create a new body and the sketch that's going to be placed along the XY plane for the base shape. We'll use a centered rectangle and hover over the center point, coincident to it, and come out. And let's type in 45 millimeters. Hit enter. And I'm just going to drop this in. I'm not going to worry about the other dimension here because I want to use the two edges and make those equal. Let's add another center rectangle. We'll come out and drop this in. We're not adding dimensions to the rectangle. I'm going to add a distance away using the dimensioning tool, using the point, and we'll see we're over constrained because we're constraining to the center point with the dimensioning tool. We need to select the other point and place in a distance away along the horizontal of 4 millimeters. And we'll do the same for the vertical of 4 millimeters. We have our base shape. Let's hit close. And now we can pad this by selecting the sketch and applying a pad. We'll pad the length by 80 millimeters. Click off. This is padded up from our plane here. So if we come onto the model and look at the origin and the XY plane, and the origin has to be visible. So we click on the eye, we can see that the XY plane, this one here, we've padded up from it. Let's hide the other planes by clicking on them, pressing the spacebar. We can see it there. So any mirror operations will be over this plane unless we select a reference. If we go back to the task and have a look at the pad, we can pad symmetrical to plane. So this means that any mirrors will be over this plane, and we could create, say, a sketch on the top and mirror that to the other side. Now we have to think about how we use symmetry. It's important at the early stages to consider pad symmetry and features we intend to create. In this model, we'll be adding a pocket at either ends, allowing for our fitted parts. Since the design means full symmetry, then we can use a symmetry that is not symmetrical to plane and reduce the length by 40 millimeters. We apply the feature to the top, the pocket, and then mirror over this plane. But if our body differed, so let's set this back to 80 and use symmetrical to plane. And let's say parts of this body thickened out this way, or there was features in here, but the openings were the same, then we would create the body, the feature, and then mirror the feature rather than the body. So it's important to think about your model to understand how you can apply features later on in the tree. That's key to mirroring the feature this way. So we've got the length of 80 millimeters and let's hit OK. I'm going to hide the origin. Click on the origin, press the spacebar, or use the eye. Now create the feature on the top. Select in the top face. Create a sketch. That's imports and geometry. I'm going to import the top point and we'll create a center rectangle. Connect that to the center and come out. The top point, right click to cancel. We use these 2 points and add a dimension. We'll set it 2 millimeters away and do the same for this one as well. Notice the way we add the dimension. If we select the points first and then use the dimensioning tool, ultimately we get the dimension we need. Whereas using the dimensioning tool first, selecting one, it will constrain to the center, and then selecting the other point, we have our dimension. Choose 2 millimeters as well. We're fully constrained, that's close. Now select the sketch and we'll create the pocket. I'm going to pocket to a depth of 3 millimeters and hit enter. Now we have our pocket, we can take the pocket and create the mirror. We want to mirror over the XY plane. So you can see the plane here. We use the drop down XY plane, and what we should have, if I click off, look down the bottom, and we see the feature there. So we're mirrored over here. Let's hit OK. We have our base shape, and we can add the pattern for our next step. The pattern we're going to add is the ventilation holes. So we'll select the face and create a new sketch. It's centered. We can move the sketch up if we want to. And here we'll create our base shape. This will be polar patterned around this point here. Now, if you're creating patterns, a good idea is to use the polyline, and we can sketch a shape that we want to pattern. So I want something like this. Let's right click to cancel and right click to cancel again. So in the end, I will create an offset with this shape, but using a single polyline allows me to position this in the desired location with the minimum of edges. So I'm going to take this point and this one and set a distance, set horizontal distance of 5 millimeters and a vertical distance of 5 millimeters as well. Still got the dimension tool active, so that's set between this line, click this line and this one, an angle. of 120 degrees and hit enter. Same for this side. Let's dimension this line. Let's use 12. Right click to cancel, and let's make these two equal. We have this shape here at the moment. Clean up the dimensions and set a length for this one as well. Around about 7mm. So we have a base shape. Let's right click to cancel. And what I'm going to do is use this tool in the top right here, which is Switch Virtual Space. Also available from Sketch, Sketch Visuals, and Switch Virtual Space. The dimensions disappeared, but that's fine. If I use the tool again, we get them back. So what this allows me to do is hide those dimensions whilst I work on the geometry. Let's highlight by click and dragging a rectangle selection around those lines. You can see them selected there. And then right click and apply an offset. Look to the left and add offset constraint. I'm going to set the offset constraint to 1.5mm. So now we've got this in here. We've got 2 degrees of freedom. And as you can see, as I pulled this edge here, the screen update, and these have become fully constrained, but we've got 2 degrees of freedom. And if I click on the 2 degrees, we should see, as we come down here, the 2 items that have been selected. We can select one and also use the check on the end, and we see it appear and disappear. We can see this one here has degrees of freedom. And this is construction geometry. So you can see the checked lines, and it's just not constrained down. If we wanted to, we could constrain it down by selecting the points and constraining those down, and the same for this one. It's fully constrained now. One thing that we have to do is take the internal geometry, make that construction. So we have a closed wire, and this is just for construction purposes. Let's close that now. So we've got the sketch already selected, and we can make a pocket out of that. Let's pocket. 5mm is enough, and that will go through now the other side. Let's hit OK. We can now use our multi-transform tool. So select the pocket and use the multi-transform. Let's right click and add a polar pattern. To pattern this feature, we need 3 occurrences. It's going over the normal sketch. We can change this to the base Y if we want to, so the green axis here. Let's hit OK. Then add another transformation, right click, and then add another polar pattern. This time, we can pattern around the Z axis. Also, if we look, we can create some interesting pattern results. So we've got this result here. So if I'm happy with this, we can hit OK again, and then right click and add another polar pattern, but this time change the axis to the base Z axis. So this one here. And if we look, we've patterned the pattern around to the other side. If we use 3 occurrences, because I only want this on 3 sides, then you can see we're getting into a bit of an issue here. And this is because of the angle. So the moment is 360. So let's come into the offset angle and type in 360 divided by 4. So the 4 sides, and click off. Now we get the patterns and the side that we don't want to pattern on free of any features. So we've created our shapes that we need. Let's hit OK. Last thing I'm going to do with this body is select the back and create another sketch. And I'm going to create some mounting holes in here. Now, again, I could use a pattern if I wanted to and pattern a feature around here. But in this case, it may be just easy enough to add a sketch. And this is going to be construction geometry. Let's highlight that and make that construction. Add some circles to the ends. Right click to cancel. Select all circles, clicking once on them and adding them to the Hungary selection. And we'll set a diameter. So now we've got those in place. We've got equal constraints across those because we added the dimension to 4 of the circles. And now I can use the import geometry, import this point, right click to cancel, and take these 2 points and use the dimensioning constraint and set a distance of 5mm away and the same for the top. So we've got our sketch with the holes. You can see the construction geometry has disappeared, and I may want to take that sketch now and change these so they're a bit further in. Let's say 8mm. And our 5mm hole should be 3mm. Let's close that. Take the sketch and create a pocket. Again, the length is 5mm. That's taken us all the way through and out the back. Let's hit OK. We've completed our first part. Right click and rename. And set this to mid-body. Remember to save, and now we can tackle the top and bottom. Just want to go through a potential problem that you may encounter when using patterning with subshape binders. So if we think about what we've got in this example, we have a polar pattern that patterns a pocket. So when we increase the number of occurrences, we get a change in the edges. So if we're creating something like a subshape binder, create a new body and bind this face, and we're referencing the edges to make something on here. We've got the binder at the moment, the body is active. Let's select the binder and hide the body to make sure we're actually selecting the binder, and then create a sketch. If we start importing these edges using external geometry tool and using these to reference our geometry, then when these configure by a change, then we may hit an issue. We'll come back to the body and we've got that sketch there. Change the polar pattern, say 3 occurrences. We can see the subshape binder is so far okay. And let's increase it to something like 9. Notice the binder now is bound to the whole object. So we've broken the binder. The sketch is still sitting on the binder, but the binder itself has an issue. Let's decrease that. Clicking on the polar pattern, bringing down the occurrences. And it hasn't fixed itself. The way to get around this is to bind to an earlier operation in the tree. So instead of binding to the polar pattern, let's just delete those 2. We go up to a stable operation. This could be the pocket, or even better still, the pad. So I'll combine to this face. This operation is more stable than the pattern because it's less likely to change. And when we say less likely to change, that means additional faces or additional edges. With the pattern, each time we increase that occurrence, we're adding more faces and edges. Bring back the body, change the polar pattern, and also show the binder so we can see what's happening with the binder. As we change the polar pattern, go to 9 occurrences. Obviously, we've got to show the polar pattern, press the spacebar on the polar pattern, we can see the binder is still there because it's attached to the pad. So we look at the binder, we can see it's pad face 2. It's on a very stable operation or a very stable feature in the tree. So just be wary of that when creating shape binders against patterning features. Let's get back to our project. So we've virtually completed the middle part of our body and we're ready to add the finishing. This is where we've got to think about what other parts are going to connect to this body. So we want a top and end cap to this. So let's say our finishing we wanted was some chamfering, and I can start going around and selecting the edges I want to chamfer. Also remembering the internal edges. Let's create the chamfer and then I can add those edges as we go. Hit select, we work our way around the model. Now I've added a face there, that's just right click and remove that, or I can click on the face. I'm going to come up and drop this down and use edge selection. So now I can select just the edges, add in to the list on the left, working my way around the model. So if we've added chamfers, then we're changing the face geometry of the tip operation, the last operation in the tree. If we do this and shape bind to say this face here, let's hit OK to see the chamfers. Then look at the face geometry. We're going to end up with a chamfered shape to start with, which defeats the object of simplifying the subject. But this still is fine, because what we can do, let's create a new body, and I'm going to hit the home key, placing me into the default view. And instead of selecting this top face with the active body and creating a subshape binder to pull that face in, let's come and look at the mid body, work our way down. So we got the pocket, we make that visible. You can see we've lost the chamfer, so we could bind to this face, but we've got a multi-transform here, which if the currencies change, then it could affect our binding. So I'm going to go one operation up, which is the pocket. This is a more stable operation. It's not multi-transform, so the faces are less likely to change and cause disruption with our shape binder. So I'm going to select the face of that pocket and create a subshape binder. Let's come back and click on the chamfer and press the space bar to show it. And you can see what's happened there. Let's click off. So you can see we've got the original shape of the operation that's a couple of operations before the chamfer feature. Let's come up and hide the mid body. Click on it, press the space bar, and we can start sketching upon the shape binder for our new body. Create a sketch. So this is the internal edge, and we want to leave some clearance. Let's import this point here and add a centered rectangle. Come out, right click to cancel, and we'll set some distance away between these two. I'm going to go for 0.25 millimeters for that one, and the same for the height. Use the import tool and pull in this point. Zoom out, and again using the center rectangle, hover over the center point, click, and then connect straight up to this point here, and click again. So we're all fully constrained. Close that, and we can pad this now. Before we pad, let's come up, click on the main body, and press the space bar. So we can see how far we need to pad this sketch up. So pad the sketch that we just created, and let's reduce this down 3 millimeters, will place us in line with this top. We can add a little bit of clearance if we wanted to, so 3.25. Obviously, because we haven't got the chamfers, it's going to cut into this material. So we need to add the chamfers later. Let's create the next part, select the top face, and create a sketch. Use the center rectangle again, and come out. And we'll set a dimension of 45mm and hit enter. We're not bothered about this dimension here, so we'll drop it because we're going to use an equality constraint across two of these edges. Let's hit close. With that sketch, we can now pad, and I'm going to taper inwards. So about -15. And then hit OK. So at the moment we've got a solid top to our body. I'm going to click on the body. You notice the chamfer has been selected, label chamfer. Click again and once more. And if we look, the label is mid body. So selected the mid body, and I can press the spacebar to hide that. If I look at the top, we can see we've got a solid top, which I need to pocket out. We can't do this with a thickness. As you can see, it's not taking. We need to select the inside and create a sketch upon it. Use the import geometry tool, and we'll import these 2 points. Use the section view, look from the bottom, and create a centered rectangle. Connecting up to this point. I didn't have to pull in this point here because we're using symmetry. That was a small mistake. And close that. I can now take that sketch and create a pocket. So I'm pocketing out material from the inside. If I pocket too far down, I come out the other side. Let's pocket down to around about 6mm. And if I click, right click and toggle transparency, we can see what's happening within. I can use the taper angle again in the minus direction and set this to -15. The length, I'm going to go deeper by 7mm and then hit OK. Next part I want to model is on this side. Let's click, right click and toggle transparency. We have to select it first. If I didn't select it first and just rolled over it and clicked, then I'll get a different menu. So let's use this face and create a new sketch. Place a circle, and this is going to be the nozzle. And we'll set the dimension of 14mm. Let's hit close. The sketch is selected, and we'll create a pad. We'll pad to 20mm. And also, we'll add some taper angle. And let's do a reverse taper angle of -10. And hit OK. Create a sketch upon this face to create a pocket. I could use a subshape binder and use the offset. I'm just going to add a small circle in here. Set dimensions of 5mm. Close, and we'll use a pocket. This is going to go through all, or we can set the depth, go through all. And we want this to taper as well. So I'm going to select it, right click, toggle transparency so we can see it in there. And if I'm using through all, I can't use the taper because we're tapering to a length. So I have to use a length. So we can set the length, making sure we come out the other side, and also through the nozzle, through the material. And that's set the taper of 10 and hit OK. We can finish this now by adding holes to keep the transparency so we can see what's going on inside. Select the face, create a sketch. We could use the center rectangle. Let's just use circles this time to show another method. Add the circles in. Right click to cancel. Use the strain horizontal and vertical, and we'll line these up with each other. Just add in horizontal and vertical constraints in. Right click to cancel again. So these move inwards and upwards and they're constrained together. Set all of these to a diameter of 3 millimeters. And we can either import some geometry or we can constrain to the center point. So using dimensioning constraint, let's click on this one and use M on the keyboard, and we get 2 constraints now. So we're cycling through using the M key. So 1 constraint, M again for 2 constraints. That will constrain it to that center point there. Click and set a distance away of 12 millimeters and hit OK. And the second constraint, again, I'm going to go for 12 millimeters. Right click to cancel and take this one and center one and use a symmetrical constraint to finally lock that down. Let's hit close. The sketch is already selected, so we can use the pocket and go through all and hit OK. So I've created the end cap with the nozzle. Let's just rename this end cap and click it. We'll toggle the transparency so we can see it there. So we're at the point where we can add the chamfers to the end cap, because if we look back at the mid body and press the spacebar, we can see we have a fit here, but if we zoom in, we can see we need the chamfers. And if I right click and toggle transparency and look within, we can see the fit. So this fits in here. We can see we need to chamfer this part to make this fit properly, because we used the binder to an earlier feature. So I'm going to hide the mid body, come up and hide that. And let's add the chamfers. So I can control click the edges if I wanted to, add the chamfer, or we just add them to the list. Let's use the edge selection again. And again, it's a case of working around the edges, making sure we hit select first. Remember to do that, otherwise they won't add to the list. And you'll see them marked in a purpley color depending on what your settings are. And we can work around the edges. Once we complete and we've got all the edges we need, we can do a final check. We can always go back, double click on the chamfer, add more edges if necessary. And let's hit OK. So now what we should have is, if I come back to the mid body, press the spacebar, our fit should be correct now. So we can see we've got this fit in here. So now it's time to create the top cap. Now this is quite an easy one to get the base shape first, because we've got our mid body, which I'm going to hide, and we also have our end cap. I don't want this part of the end cap, so I can work my way back up and show parts of the model until I get to the features that I want. So pocket 003, this is the basic shape I want. Here's the tip, gone to pocket 003, back in history, And I'm going to select that pocket and use the part design clone tool, create a clone. What's happened now, I've got another body here and I need to hide the end cap. So let's click on the chamfer and press the space bar. So the tip is visible. Click on the end cap and press the space bar here. So we've got another body which is cloned from our operation in the end cap, saving us time and enhancing our workflow. Just going to call this top cap. So now what we have is part of the model done, but there's a missing feature. We want the ventilation holes in the same style as what we have on our mid body. So let's go back to the mid body and press the space bar. Notice also this is round the wrong way. It should be up the top. We'll deal with that in a moment. So I want this one here. So this multi-transform on here. It's in another body, so I can't use that from that body. But what I can do is use a sketch. And I'm going to use a clone workflow for this, not a part design clone, a draft clone. So we're recreating, if I look down, got this pocket here. Inside the pocket is the sketch. And this is from our mid body. Let's click on it and press the space bar. So we should be able to see it somewhere. I'll hover over it. There it is there. On this side. And you can see it in yellow. So let's come over to the draft workbench. We can see we've got the sketch here. Let's click on it. Come up to the modifications and clone. This clones the sketch. Let's hide that sketch and hide the mid body, pressing the spacebar. So we've got a clone of the sketch. We're dealing with the top cap. So take the clone and drop it into the top cap and expand the top cap. Let's come back to the part design workbench and click on model. So this clone has attachment. You can see the map mode. And the object that it's been cloned from is sketch 2. Let's come down to the map mode, which is deactivated, and click on the button at the end. So now we can select this face. And if we look, put some angle on there so we can see that sketch, it's now sitting on that face. The plain face. Let's hit OK. You can add some adjustment to the placement, the attachment offset. And the position, we can move it if we need to. But as we've used symmetry, it's in the correct place. Now I can take that sketch and use the pocket. Saying cannot use selected object, and that's because the top cap is deactivated. So let's double click on the top cap to make sure it's in bold. And you can see it's an active body. Click the clone, use the pocket. That's OK. And now I'm going to use the pocket and create a multi-transform. And it's the same process. Right click, add a polar pattern. We want 3 occurrences. And that may be enough for what I want. But if I wanted another occurrence, let's right click and add another polar pattern. So it's in the same style, we can. I may need to pull the sketch in slightly, so reduce the thickness here because we've got a thinning of material. We can easily do that just by changing our original sketch, and that will affect the clone. So any amendments to that sketch. So we have a width in here somewhere, and it's here, the 1.5 millimeters. Let's double click that and set this to 1 millimeter. And close. That will affect the clone and also the multi-transform. Go up to the mid body and press the spacebar. Just show that. So you got those there. Go back into the multi-transform and we can make some amendments in here if we wanted to add more but I'm just going to go for that. So now we've got the feature on the bottom. I can add additional holes if I wanted to in here, just the same process. Got the top cap, we add the holes to there. And we have the end cap. They are in the same position, but we could take the top cap if we're not using something like an assembly workbench and right click and transform that. The point of rotation is in the middle. Let's do this properly and come in. So we can rotate around here and put this in place. And what will happen if I hit OK, because of all the attachment, the pattern stays in place. Again, remember that we need to add the chamfers. So we need to chamfer these edges and also the internal edges as well, as we did for this one. But I'm not going to bore you with that because this lesson has taken quite a time. There's a lot in that lesson to learn, lots of tips. And I hope that was helpful. And I look forward to seeing you in the next part of this course. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you again. If you like what you see and you want to donate to the channel, then you can do so via Ko-Fi or Ko-fi at ko-fi.com/MANG0 or via PayPal at paypal.com/paypalme/Darren B. Eastone. I also run a Patreon where you can get early access and additional content, and that's at patreon.com/MangoJelly Solutions. Links can be found in the channel header, on the About page, or in the descriptions of these videos. I thank everybody that's donated so far. It really helps to keep the lights on so I can produce more content and also expand the channel. Thank you for liking, commenting and subscribing to these videos, and I hope to see you again in the next one.